Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's Roshan Muhammed Salih here, the editor-in-chief of Five Pillars, and this is The Big Picture, our weekly show where we break down the top stories that are affecting the Muslim Ummah each week. And this week, we got an international show for you. We got a guest from Chicago, USA. We got a guest from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. And I'm here, of course, in London, the United Kingdom. We've got three topics today. We're going to be talking about the US election. We're going to be asking what's in it for Muslims. How should they vote? Should they vote? How's it going to affect Muslims overseas? We're going to be talking about Emmanuel Macron, who gave a very Islamophobic speech. That's the president of France. We're going to be asking, is France a racist and Islamophobic country to its core? And we're also going to be talking about Nagorno-Karabakh, the war that's broken out between Armenia and Azerbaijan in the South Caucasus. Should we be bothered? It's not an area of the world that Muslims know a lot about. Should we be worried about it? Could it lead to a wider regional war? But first, as usual, we're going to start with some of the other stories that have really been very popular on the Five Pillars website over the past week. And the first story I'm going to start with concerns two Muslim brothers from Blackburn in the north of England who bought the supermarket chain Asda in a $6.8 billion deal. And these are those guys, a consortium of Zuba and Mohsin Isa and a private equity firm, TDR Capital, will take a majority stake in Asda. But the deal has raised questions about the haram debt the brothers used to buy the company and whether or not Muslim businesses should be selling alcohol and pork. And also we have a very popular story on the website concerning Katie Hopkins, the Islamophobic, racist media personality who basically libeled Finsbury Park Mosque in North London. Now, Hopkins said that she falsely linked the masjid to a violent incident in May, and the mosque brought legal action against her after she tweeted footage of 5 men attacking Met police officers, implying wrongly that the perpetrators were members of the mosque's community. And that isn't the first time that Katie Hopkins has been sued. And finally, we've got a story from Sri Lanka where the government, the Islamophobic government, has basically banned cattle slaughter in a move that's being seen as being politically motivated to harm Muslims and appease the Buddhist nationalist majority. And of course, it's thought that the ban will particularly target Muslim traders who have a monopoly on the beef trade. Buddhist majority Sri Lanka has been targeting Muslims since the end of the country's civil war around a decade ago. All right, without further ado, let's get into our first topic, which is the United States elections. It's going to be happening about 4 weeks from now. The United States, of course, is the most powerful country in the world, economically, militarily, politically. So this should concern us all. We had a bad-tempered debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump around a week ago or 5 or 6 days ago. We've got Trump, who apparently fell sick with COVID, but now is better. But before we get into our guest from Chicago, let's take a look at that bad-tempered debate between Trump and Biden, and especially a segment of that debate which dealt with racism.
Is why should voters trust you rather than your opponent to deal with the race issues facing this country over the next 4 years?
All he ever wants to do is divide people, not unite people at all. This is a president who has used everything as a dog whistle to try to generate racist hatred, racist division.
He did a crime bill, 1994, where you call them super predators, African Americans, the super predators, and they've never forgotten it. They've never forgotten it, Joe.
No, sir, it's his 2 minutes.
So you did that, and they call you super predator, and I'm letting people out of jail now that you have treated the African American population community, you have treated the black community about as bad as anybody in this country. You did the 1990, and that's why, if you look at the polls, I'm doing better than any Republican has done in a long time, because they saw what you did. You call them super predators, and you've called them worse than that.
There's systemic injustice in this country, in education and work and in law enforcement and the way in which it's enforced. But look, the vast majority of police officers are good, decent, honorable men and women. They risk their lives every day to take care of us. But there are some bad apples. And when they occur, when they find them, they have to be sorted out.
All right, that was Joe Biden and Donald Trump. And I'm delighted to be joined all the way from the good old US of A in Chicago by Ramin Mazaheri, a friend of mine. Ramin is an international journalist. He's done a lot of work in the United States and also in France. And he has worked most notably for the international 24-hour news channel, Press TV. Ramin, nice to see you again, brother. How are you doing?
Doing good. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for having me.
Walaikum salam. So Trump, he fell ill with coronavirus about 2 days ago, and he's already recovered. Was he faking it?
Was he faking it? No, it's just the greatest recovery ever. It's the biggest story in the world. He feels 20 years younger. He's probably lost 50 pounds. It's just stupendous. Was he faking it? That's certainly a good question. I mean, it certainly did distract from his from his tax issues. I think to me, do I think he was faking it? No, that's a very big conspiracy. You would have to have all the doctors involved, everybody at Walter Reed down to the custodians. I think he just actually caught it. It's surprising that he hasn't. He does go around without a mask very often, and he got it. And he only had someone who's 74 years old. And overweight, he still only had a 3% chance of dying. So, many people over here are, upset that he has recovered. But what did they expect? I mean, people who thought that, Corona was just going to produce bodies in the street back in March, they've been proven wrong. So it's the latest twist in for the American people who have just gotten sort of their butt kicked in 2020 with one shocking bit of bad news after another. And then, the last month has been really, it's just kind of one thing after another. But Trump's okay. Don't worry about him. He'll be just fine. He's going to be.
You sound like that's an impression of Alec Baldwin doing an impression of Donald Trump. But anyway, let's move on.
That's what everybody says. But, Roshan, I have to have one because this is America. Everybody has a Donald Trump impression. So,
Ramin, who are you going to vote for?
I'm going to vote for a real party. I am going to vote for the third time in a row, Party for Socialism and Liberation. We got about 40,000 votes last time. We all know each other. We hang out. But if this was a two-round system, I would vote for Donald Trump in half a second without even thinking about it.
Why? Why would you vote for Trump? Because I know that most American Muslims, they feel under siege, and I've seen a few polls that like 70 to 80% of American Muslims are going to vote for Joe Biden, not because they love him, but because he's not Donald Trump. You're going to vote for Trump. Why?
I mean, the polls, what you're saying, they are right, but in recent months, they're saying that something like 35% of Muslims now support the president. So they are actually, they're still the religious group that's the least supportive of Trump, except for atheists, and we can call them, a faith-based group. Why not? I think, first of all, above all, we can't be a one issue voter. You have to look at things globally. And when it comes to the United States, the United States is not Pago. It's not Bora Bora. The international aspect of the United States, and no country affects the world more than the United States. So, I think that I can still be a Muslim and vote, if it was a two-round system, and still vote for Donald Trump because, tomorrow is a very historic day. It is the 19th anniversary of the U.S. invasion of Afghanistan. And I was talking with Trump supporters recently, and they pointed out Trump is the least belligerent president in their lifetimes. He has not started any wars. You look at, for example, Obama. He bombed, was it 7 or is it 8 Muslim countries? Trump did bomb Syria, but, I think that it's kind of, to me, it's rather obvious that Trump is pushed into warmongering by other people. I don't think that he is like Hillary Clinton, who said, about, Gaddafi, we came, we saw, he died, which is just saying that she just loves to murder. She loved, she didn't even want to conquer. She just wanted to murder. And Trump is very much to me like the old saying about Gerald Ford, who took over for Richard Nixon here. He was the greatest U.S. president ever because he had the least time served. He was only president for 1.5 years. Least time served, least damage done. And I think Trump, because he's not one of he's not part of the swamp, and that's something that you really have to talk about here. The corruption, the endemic corruption that is personified by Joe Biden. Because Trump is not a politician, he is not so belligerent. He is his instincts, and he ran on a policy of pulling out of Afghanistan, pulling out of Iraq.
I mean, let's stop you there for a second. I mean, he did very nearly cause a war with Iran at the beginning of this year by assassinating their top general. He's made these peace deals between Arab countries and Israel. I mean, it's true that he hasn't started a war like George Bush did, etc., not done as many drone strikes as Obama did, but you could argue that he's laying the grounds for a future war, right?
Well, but I think that, you're looking at Trump really kind of in a vacuum there, because didn't Obama lay the grounds? Didn't W. Bush? I mean, didn't, Bill Clinton and, Ronald Reagan? None of these people had any sort of pro-Iran policy whatsoever. None of them had any sort of, pro-Muslim or just Muslim neutral policy. So I think that we can, if you want to look at Trump in a vacuum, of course, he's absolutely terrible. But I can tell you that Americans don't look at it they don't look at it that way. They look at Trump as the best option in a horribly corrupt duopoly. And I think that people who live outside of the U.S., they would be well served to remember that it was W. Bush who invaded Afghanistan, and it was Barack Obama who had the surge there, and and Iraq, and all over the world. So I think that. As far as
Ramin, I mean, at the moment, Biden's got like a 5 percentage point lead. That he's had that lead for quite a while. The polls don't seem to have changed. It looks like he's on course to victory. Do you think that Trump can pull this rabbit out of the hat?
There was a very interesting poll that came out from Gallup, which is perhaps the top polling institution here, and this poll has been accurate since 1996. They asked Americans, who do you think will win? And since 1996, this poll has correctly predicted the winner of the popular vote, not the electoral college, the popular vote. And 56% of Americans think Trump is going to win. That includes 24% of Democrats. 56 think Trump is going to win. Only 40% think Biden is going to win. Now, that's a big spread. That the spreads that you cited there, the most recent spread is 8 points. So I think that the American people know their own country, and they are predicting Trump is going to win. If you're asking me as a journalist, I think it's kind of just very hard to say. I think that it's very much like France in that prior to 2017, you would never have anybody admit that they were voting for the National Front, and yet they would do very well in the first round. So I think it's hard to tell.
Neck and neck. And what about the candidates themselves? Let's go through them. So if Trump wins, what can we expect from him in terms of what can Muslims expect from him in a second term? And if Biden wins, what can we expect from him?
I don't think that Muslims can, expect anything from anybody here. I mean, this is a country where Islam is basically totally absent. It's very different from France. I mean, it's an interesting idea that hit upon me, and I should write a column about it. But this is the Western country with the least amount of Muslim influence. Muslims are not discussed. They are not really seen that much. They have really kind of no power. But of course, they are mostly very well-educated people that have come in, and they're serving as the doctors and the engineers. But I think that, if it's always, you have to, sort of, compare things. I think it's certainly better to be a Muslim here than in France, but that's not saying much at all. I just think that if Muslims are expecting anything, I mean, they're not big enough to be targeted for any sort of, political favors. And
what about Muslims overseas?
I'm sorry, say again?
What about Muslims overseas? What can they expect from the two candidates?
Well, I think that, like I was trying to say, I think with Biden, you'll get talk about tolerance and multiculturalism, and then you'll get more bombs. And I think with Trump, you're going to get very tough talk and tough actions. Like, for example, incredibly Islamophobic travel ban, but you're going to get more peace from Trump. As you know, I mean, this is the opposite of what the mainstream media says, but I think after 4 years, we can say that Trump has been less belligerent towards foreign Muslims than even Obama, the son of a Muslim. And it's certainly very telling, but both of them, of course, are just really kind of terrible regarding the Muslim world, regarding the developing world, regarding the non-Western world, regarding, the colonized world, formerly colonized.
Ramin, let's talk about the wider election. I mean, Trump has already basically intimated that the vote is rigged. Yeah. There is huge influence of money in the elections. Is this a free and fair election?
Absolutely.
Or is it rigged either by literally voter fraud, or is it rigged through money?
I'll give you a great example. I did a story for Press TV where, about how the Democrats and Republicans collude to keep third parties off the ballot. And I was this particular story focused on the Green Party, but there are other parties. Both of the mainstream parties, they throw up so many obstacles, legal obstacles, for example, and then you have things like in Montana where Democrats called up people who signed a petition to put the Green Party on the ballot. They called them 35 times to get them to rescind. So, and then you have, financial pressures, via mainly litigation efforts. And if this was any other country, the types of measures that the two parties employ to keep third parties off the ballot, if this was any other country, we would, the U.S. would say, this is not a free and fair election at all. It's dominated by two parties that are very, very similar to each other. So that's something that doesn't get talked about. And,
but even to get on the ballot, you need to be sponsored by huge lobby interests, and ultimately you have to pay them back when you become president. So it's not as if any Tom, Dick, and Harry can become president, right?
Well, I think every country has safeguards. I think that we should just kind of realize that. In France, for example, you have to have the signatures of 500 mayors. So the political elite has to approve. Here, to get on the ballot, both, and I'm talking about local, congressional, and presidential ballots, you have different rules in each one. But it's amazing how Democrats, for example, have created so many obstacles to keep leftist parties off the ballot, and then the conservatives try and keep the libertarians off. But as far as money, of course, you're absolutely right that as my father used to always say, you can't trust anybody who spends $1 billion to win a job that pays $250,000 a year. So the influence of money in the U.S. is just staggeringly awful, and the people here know that.
Ramin, my last question before we move on to another topic. You live in a very divided country there. I mean, I personally, I've never been to America. I'm not an expert at all. But it seems to me if this vote goes the wrong way, or if it's close, could we have a civil war type situation? A lot of crazy Trump supporters with guns in the streets in America, aren't there?
Well, that's what people are talking about. I take a different view. I think, I've talked with many people here. I ask everybody I meet about the election, and I really am swayed the kind of conservatives' view. They say that the real threat of something like that is from the left, from the fake left. Of course, Democrats are not leftist in any stretch of the imagination. But if Trump wins, I don't see the Democrats taking it well. And I see them, crying and whining and having these protests that are basically just that. However, if Trump wins, and this is what conservatives tell me, and I think it's pretty rational, conservatives will accept it eventually because, this is not the Trump party. This is the Republican Party. Conservatives, they are naturally people who want to preserve the status quo. They are naturally people who think the American system is just the greatest in the world, sanctioned by God, and that they wouldn't want to see it totally ruined. So I think that if Trump loses, I think that they would take it much better. I think that, and this is one of the reasons why I would vote for Trump, is that they need here 4 more years of honesty about their racism, their imperialism, their militarism, their right-wing capitalism. And, selecting Biden would just be a way for them to paper over all that and not look at the real problems here in America.
All right, Ramin, stay with me because we're going to take comments. Alhamdulillah, we got loads of comments coming in. Let's go through them, and if we see any interesting ones, we will stop and talk. Biden is liberal. Papa says Trump, Trump, Trump. A lot of Trump supporters here.
People love Trump.
Praise there for 5 pillars, which I always I'm keen to plug up. Very much like 5 pillars shows.
As you should, because you have come so far. It's so impressive. Really.
Alhamdulillah. All right. Wakas says all his issues are just personality traits, and his heart is good. Is he talking about? Oh, I think he's been sarcastic there about Trump. This guy wants to legalize abortion till 9 months. Is that Trump or Biden he's talking about?
That's that's Biden. And here's the thing on abortion. This is what I think that your audience outside of the U.S. would be interested to know. This is a dead issue. This was an issue 50 years ago, but abortion is the settled law of the land in the United States. They're never going to overturn it. It has something like 70+% approval overall. Even conservatives, it's above 60%. So. Yeah. This is a lot of fear-mongering from Democrats that Trump is going to, take away abortion. You might have certain states, where you can't get it, maybe 1 or 2. And you will have, I think, many states that are going to say you can't have an abortion after 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 months. But I think for the people who are, who want an abortion after 2 or 3 months, I think it's going to be widely available. What I'm saying is that this is the settled law of the land. Even, Amy Coney Barrett, who's going to be the new Supreme Court justice, she says, look, I follow precedent, and precedent after precedent after precedent has upheld this decision. And the U.S. is based on English common law. Not
so abortion is here to stay in America. All right. So Wakas says, yes, his deal of the century was for the Palestinians was ace. Again, being sarcastic. Master of sarcasm there, Wakas. The visiting soul says Trump is pulling out of the Middle East. Do you think that's true?
Well, what is it? It just came out 3 years out of Iraq, and he's reduced the troops in Afghanistan. I think that they're never going to fully leave these areas. It would take something like 1979, the Iranian hostage crisis. I mean, this is imperialism. But
yeah, I think they're going to stay in the Middle East until the oil runs out and the gas runs out. Personally, Eman says Biden promised to topple Turkey. I can't morally know that and vote for him. Ustukan says, if you want to vote for personality, not intelligence, go with Biden. Make America.
Hold on. This is something important. The biggest issue here in the United States for the past 2-3 months is, does Biden have age-related dementia? Because he hasn't been out, he hasn't been tested. Even in this, first debate, Trump never really put the pressure on him. My opinion is Biden reminds me of my 96-year-old grandfather, in that he has done very poorly as a result of the isolation caused by this year's coronavirus lockdown. Biden would be the oldest president by 7 years. I mean, this is just my opinion. He does not look. He looks like he's not.
He looks senile to me. I think he could die in office, and Kamala Harris could become the first black or the first black woman president. Let's get through a few of these comments. Sure. Because I want to give the viewers who have been kind enough sending comments in some profile. Make America native again. So there is no good candidate. Biden is better than Trump. So 80% of US will vote for Biden.
Way too much.
Usakan says Biden is trash compared to Trump. Let's get some more people on. Complex Film says, what about more genocides? Akhtar Alia says, both are crooks, but I'd go with Trump because he is transparent and hasn't declared war in the East.
And I think she gets the American, pro-Trump point of view. They're all crooks, but at least he's transparent.
Okay. I won't attempt to pronounce that. If I were a Yankee citizen, I would vote for Trump without blink. I agree Trump did less destruction in Muslim countries. That's my only concern today. And Arab potato is what he thinks. Chris Colburn says, true, Biden seems to be hinting at starting something with Erdogan Turkey in one clip. Abdullah says, there's so many comments here. Thank you guys for engaging with the content. Really happy you've done that. There's so many comments here. I'll read more out a little bit later on. This is the last one I'm going to read out for now. Abdullah says, it's a shame Trump has brought balance into the corrupt Zionist project in Palestine. Otherwise, on balance, he's not as bad as recent US presidents from an Islamic perspective. I'm really surprised, actually, because I must admit, I think I might have veered towards Biden as the lesser of two evils. But actually, most Five Pillars readers, and actually most of my friends, seem to be veering on the side of Trump. I know it's the opposite with American Muslims. I'm going to get some more comments in later, but I'm going to move on to our second topic for the time being, and that is the French president, who is, of course, Emmanuel Macron. And he has been given a very Islamophobic speech in a place called Les Yvelines last Friday. He said that Islam is in crisis, and he said that France must confront the curse of Islamic radicalism and separatism. Let's take a listen to what the French president said.
Ce à quoi nous devons nous attaquer, c'est le séparatisme islamiste.
What we need to tackle is Islamist separatism. It's a conscious, theorized, politico-religious project which materializes by repeated deviations from the values of the French Republic, which often results in the constitution of a counter-society, and whose manifestations are the dropping out of children from school, the development of community-based sporting and cultural practices, which are the pretext for teaching principles which don't comply with the laws of the Republic. It's an indoctrination, and through it there is a negation of our principles of equality between women and men and of human dignity.
Supérieure à celle de la République. Et je l'ai souvent dit, je ne demande à aucun de nos citoyens.
The problem is this ideology, which asserts that its own laws are superior to those of the Republic. As I've often said, I don't ask any of our citizens to believe or not to believe a little bit or moderately. That's not the business of the Republic. But I ask any citizen, whatever his religion, to respect absolutely the laws of the Republic.
Okay, so I'm going to get Ramin back online, because Ramin lived in France for many years. Not only an expert on the US, but you're an expert on France. In fact, I think the last time I met you, Ramin, we had a kebab together in Paris a few years ago, or maybe just a couple of years ago. Ramin, and I paid, did I? Or did you pay? I'm not sure.
I don't remember, but it's, you have to really check. That's the.
I never pay. Ramin, was that Emmanuel Macron's most Islamophobic speech? Because he's not known among the right-wing leaders of the continent as an Islamophobe, but that speech was pretty scary, right?
Well, just to tell your leaders that I do know a bit about France. I've lived there for 11 years. I've been a full-time reporter for Press TV there for 10, and I'm going back to France when I'm done with this. So your question, Macron is not a Islamophobic leader. That's not what any Muslim in France really thinks. I mean, he absolutely is Islamophobic. France is a tremendously Islamophobic country, and it pains me to say that because that's where my home is now. When I saw this speech, when I saw that he said Islam is a religion that is in crisis all over the world today, I didn't even bother reading it because it's such an absurd statement to say no Muslim believes it, no Muslim agrees with it. The crisis comes from non-Muslims, comes from capitalist imperialists going into Muslim countries, and capitalist imperialist Westerners supporting Arab monarchs that should have been toppled a century ago, that would have been toppled were the English and the French not there. So saying that Islam is in crisis all over the world today is just, it shows you how stupid the guy is, and it shows you what a political football Muslims are in France. I mean, this is really what it is. This came at the start of the Charlie Hebdo trial. And, this is how else is Macron going to get elected? How else is he going to, steal voters from the National Front? Unless he does something like this stupid new bill, that he's going to, that's going to strengthen laïcité, which is the same word, basically secularism.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's just typical in France.
Ramin, I used to live in France, as you know, and both of us, we know France. We speak the language fluently. We know the culture in the country. And I think without a doubt, I would say that it's an Islamophobic, country. It's a racist country, and it's mainstream over there. I think life for British Muslims is much easier. We complain a lot about this country, but it's a liberal paradise compared to France. But I have to say, he raised the issue of radical Islam. There have been murderous attacks on the French mainland in the last few years. No one can deny that. So is radical Islam a problem? It would, on the surface, it would seem as though maybe it is. And is France's counter-terror strategy working?
Well, let's be clear. For Macron, and what he just said here is that there is no radical Islam. There is only Islam, and Islam is always radical. And this is what many, many French people believe. This is what they are told to believe in the media, even though it's totally, totally preposterous. So for them, for the French, for many French people, there is no acceptable, open expression of Islamic faith. It's all radical. There's nothing you can do as a Muslim to be a moderate or to be, I don't know, like, a minor Muslim. If you say anything about Islam, you're a radical fundamentalist, 7th century, reactionary. Yes, there has been, violent attacks. However, I covered all of them since the year 2010. Every single one of them said the reason for this is France's wars in Mali, Syria, and elsewhere in the Muslim world. This is why it's terrorism and not just murder. There is a political component. And, this is not me excusing, something like the bloodbath at the Bataclan, at that rock concert. It was just atrocious. It was just awful. But there is this political component, and we really should not ignore that at all. The problem is, so that's France's foreign policy, and then domestically, it is this constant, I've been here in the U.S. for a few months, and I forgot, what, good old French Islamophobia is like, because here, ultimately it comes down to, very, very briefly, the French have a assimilationist model. The Anglos, they have a multicultural model. The assimilationist model insists that Muslims change their name from Mohammed to Jean-Paul and from Mariam to Marie, and that, you have to think like a French person, eat like a French person, you have to be French. Both of these models have good things and bad things, but I would say in 2020, I admire the multicultural model, even though it leads to a lot of segregation, the assimilationist model, as bad as it seems, as France seems to many Muslims, if it was done correctly, if they would embrace Muslim as you can be French and Muslim and French, it could work, but not the way the French do it. Pardon me.
I don't know whether you saw the whole speech from me, but he did actually make allusion to the banlieue, the Muslim ghettos, basically all around the big cities, outside the big cities like Lyon and Paris and Marseille. And he said that, the French state had created these ghettos as a bit of self-reflection. He also alluded to colonialism. He didn't really condemn colonialism, but he talked about the Algerian wars having a legacy. So he did try to kind of, I suppose, mitigate his words a little bit with those comments about the Muslim ghettos and colonialism. What do you make of that?
This is the best way that I can explain it about Macron. Back in 2017, I think every Muslim I talked to said that they would never vote for the National Front. It's just too personal. There's just too much hatred for them. And, in the past, year, I asked, the same Muslim people, and many of them say that they are willing to vote for Marine Le Pen in 2022 because Macron is not a centrist. We knew this from the beginning. It's like saying Obama was pro-Muslim and then, he bombed 7 different Muslim countries. It's the exact same thing. Macron is just as Islamophobic as, the leaders in Austria and Hungary. What he said today, to make no distinction between fundamentalist Islam and regular Islam, nobody else has really done that. He has sort of declared war on all Muslims, on all of Islam. So we really shouldn't try and, we really shouldn't believe that, Macron is somehow a centrist. You have many Muslims who are going to vote for the far right because Macron is worse for everybody with his austerity and with the same amount, as we see today, he has the same amount of Islamophobia as the National Front. Or maybe it's just 10% better, but 10% is not enough because there's other issues besides Islam for Muslims and for...
Okay. All right, Ramin, I know I've kept you a long time now. There are a few more comments. Can you stay for a few more minutes or do you have to go?
Sure.
Because we've got loads of comments here. I think most of them are still going to be about Trump. But let's have a look. All right, Iman P says, I used to live in France, and I don't see how it will end there. May Allah help Muslims there. Waqar says the suburbs are disgusting. Poverty on poverty. Hassan says, Online Dunya says, Hassan, terrorism and Islamic politics or Western politics. I'm not sure what he's talking about there. Hassan Sabah says, some lady from Macron's party and other MPs walked out when a hijabi girl was about to speak in their parliament. Yeah, that happened just a few weeks ago. Let's go back to Online Dunya again. We need to go out of our way to educate people on who our Prophet Muhammad is. Charlie Hebdo traduce our blessed Prophet all the time, don't they? This little Napoleon.
Can I just say one thing about that? One thing that's very important to remind people, because the Western media always covers it up. Charlie Hebdo, among those cartoons, you had one of them where Prophet Muhammad was bent over with his butt cheek spread, pardon me, and you had another cartoon where he was the director in a pornographic movie. So they never bring this up, but that's how in the blasphemy of these pictures, it was not something benign. It was this aggressive, disgusting type of imagery, and we should not forget that.
Okay, let me go through a few more comments, and then I'll give you the final word, Ramin. Visiting soul, bonjour. Visiting soul.
Comment ça va?
Comment ça va? Macron is preparing for his re-election. At the same time, he has a problem with Turkey. Atta says, how are Muslims doing nothing to change this anti-Islam movement in France when Muslims make up 8.8% of French? I think it's about 5 million French people. What are French Muslims doing?
5 to 10 million, 5 to 10% of the population. Those are the estimates. The reason they aren't changing it is because Muslims are on absolutely the bottom of the social totem pole. They have no power. They have no money. They are the poorest. It's better to be a, sub-Saharan African. If you wear those nice, very colorful, sub-Saharan African types of clothes, you get treated with more respect than if you are a Algerian, even dressed in Western clothes. So Muslims don't have the socio-economic or cultural power to make any changes.
All right. Wasn't it for Muslims that won France the World Cup? Yeah, I think that was a fig leaf, wasn't it? There was a lot of, they won 2 World Cups, didn't they, for France in 98 and 2018. But ultimately, there's a moment of euphoria and, multicultural France. It doesn't last very long, and people figure out the truth sooner or later. Ramin, I could talk to you a lot longer, and there's so many more comments that we haven't gone through. Really enjoyed your contribution today. I hope you've enjoyed it too. And I hope to see you soon. Take care.
All right. Thank you very much.
Alaikum salam.
Alaikum salam.
Okay. That was Ramin Mazaheri from Chicago in the good old US of A. Okay. We're going to move on now to our final topic of the day, and that is Azerbaijan and Armenia. There is basically a war going on over there, and Azerbaijan's second largest city has been attacked by missiles from Armenia. War broke out there between the two neighbors in the South Caucasus about a week ago. The fighting so far has been confined mainly to the Nagorno-Karabakh area, which is a disputed area, which is ethnic Armenian majority, but ultimately the Azeris claim it as well. Nearly 200 servicemen from Nagorno-Karabakh have died so far, while Azerbaijani officials say 22 civilians have died and 74 have been injured. Okay, we got an Azeri guest coming on in a few minutes' time. But first of all, let's take a little look at what's been going on in Azerbaijan and Armenia over the past week.
İçeride kimse var mı? Yaşıyorlar mı burada?
Okay, so we're actually waiting for our guest who is in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Oh, I can see him there just in time. Maqsood Javidov. How you doing, Maqsood? Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam. How are you?
How's life there in sunny Malaysia?
It's good. It's rainy. It's late. It's good.
Humid, I bet, right?
Yes. Yes.
All right, Maqsood, you are an Azeri. You're born in Azerbaijan. You lived there for the first 15 years of your life. You now are a columnist for Crescent International, and you are the deputy editor of anti-imperialist.com. Is that correct?
No, anti-orientalist.com.
Anti-orientalist.com. So please check out those two websites, Crescent International and anti-orientalist.com. Maqsood, really happy to have you online joining us. We're talking about a subject that I must admit I'm pretty ignorant about. I don't know much about Azerbaijan. I don't know much about Armenia. I can hardly pronounce Nagorno-Karabakh. And I bet a lot of our readers are in the same boat as me. What the heck's going on over there? And should we care?
First of all, yes, we should, because Caucasus is geopolitically a very important region, number one. Number two, let me just briefly go to the background of the conflict. It goes back to the Soviet Union. Soviet Union collapsed.
Maqsood, I can't hear you very well. Could you turn your volume up a little bit?
Yeah, just a second.
That's much better. That's much better.
Okay,
yes.
Can you hear me now? Yeah, so the Soviet Union collapsed, and basically every ethnicity wanted to establish statehood. And one of those ethnicities were Armenians living in Karabakh, which was part of Azerbaijan. So they, with the aid of Russia, which has been always the historical and geopolitical ally of Armenia, managed to basically kick out Azeris, ethnically cleanse the region, plus occupy 7 additional regions, right? Now, overall, Azeris and Armenians, we are neighbors. We're from the Caucasus. Yes, we have different religions, we have different culture, but we have the same mentality. We lived in the Soviet Union for almost over 70 years. So, of course, when the Soviet Union collapsed, there were some forces on both sides that artificially inflated this conflict. And bigger powers got involved. So right now, it's just that the government, the regime in Azerbaijan, which, by the way, is not popular at all, is basically trying to score domestic and international points. But number one thing is that, there's an expression, all politics is local. I know your viewers and everybody reads NATO, Turkey, US. The external factor is there, but it's secondary. The primary aspect is internal, and it goes just to a few days. I'll just give some brief examples. In July, there was a clashes between Armenia and Azerbaijan lost a general, and basically people were really upset. About 30 to 40,000 people came to demonstrate in the capital city alone, demanding that the regime restore Azerbaijan's territorial sovereignty. This really spooked the regime. This really spooked the government, because it's first time a mass amount of people were demanding something from the regime. It's always the regime, the Aliyev regime, that demands something from the people. Now, on top of that, 2 years ago, we had a revolution in Armenia, a popular uprising, which for the first time in about 30 years brought to power an Armenian leader who is more pro-West rather than pro-Russia. And he purged the Armenian political landscape from all pro-Russian politicians, like really high up people. Yeah. And this really irked Russia, because geopolitically they always backed Armenia. This kind of, it's something like, imagine somebody, a Russian media outlet put it well, Norway arresting General Secretary of Norway, okay, and US just stands by. So for Russia, it's something like that. But right now, everybody is focused on the role of Turkey. This is not the Turkish game. This is a Russian game, and they're playing it with a great finesse. Yeah, they are the main player. The fact that it's
so
people.
Just before you go on here, because I'm sure a lot of our viewers are struggling to understand this. Not because you're not explaining it well, but simply because our lack of knowledge. Who is Armenia allied with, and who is Azerbaijan allied with?
At the moment, so Azeris are Turks, right? Azeris are Turks, but hey, guess what? We're Shia. We're 80% of Azerbaijan is Shia.
Okay.
And percentage-wise, it's the biggest how should I say, Shia country after Iran. And by the way, most of your readers probably never heard of Azerbaijan, but based on the 5 Pillars audience, they love going after the Safavids. And the Safavids were not Persian, actually. They were Turkic.
Okay.
Right? So Armenia was always allied with Russia. It's a oldest Christian nation. And Azerbaijan has been traditionally allied with Turkey, right? Because of the history Armenia had with the Ottoman Empire. There was a lot of injustices perpetrated against Armenians, and vice versa. So currently, like before, like 100 years ago, Armenia is allied with Russia and Azerbaijan is allied with Turkey.
Right. Okay. And obviously, Turkey and Russia are rivals. They cooperate in some arenas and they disagree in others.
But in this particular circumstances, they are cooperating. And I'll give a very simple explanation. Russia is extremely sensitive to any NATO or Western-oriented presence in what it's called its privileged sphere of influence. They don't Moscow does not identify Caucasus and Central Asia as its sphere of influence, its privileged sphere of influence. This is something Medvedev said in 2008. Remember when Georgia tried to restore its territorial integrity in South Ossetia? What did Russia do? Russia went straight into Georgia militarily because Georgia was very openly backed by NATO.
Maksud, is this going to be contained to a local war like we've seen in the past, or do you think it's going to spread into a regional war?
Well, these sort of processes can easily get out of hand. We've seen what happened in Syria. The West planned one thing and another thing happened. Arab Spring, people planned one thing and another thing happened. So here, the game plan is Turkey agreed with Russia to pressure Armenia. And it serves both. Why? Because by allowing Turkey to pressure Armenia, Russia could potentially change the pro-Western government in Armenia.
Okay,
and allow
you're saying that your analysis is that Russia might have instigated this because they're not happy with the Armenian government.
They did not instigate, but they just most probably agreed with Turkey and Azerbaijan that if Azerbaijan were to restore its territorial integrity, we would not intervene.
Yeah.
And on August 25th, I believe, Russian defense minister flew to Azerbaijan and he met the unelected leader, Ilham Aliyev. He met him and their official meeting was described as a defense cooperation meeting. After he left in August, the regime in Baku increased its rhetoric about Karabakh and so on. So it is impossible that Russia would just simply sit and act as relaxed as they're acting now, with the NATO power being actively involved in their privileged sphere of influence.
And the NATO power, you're talking about Turkey, right?
Yes.
So who should we support? I'm still confused. As Muslims,
well,
who are the good guys? Who are the bad guys? Who should we be supporting?
Well, we should be supporting the side that hopefully is not going to practice ethnic cleansing. Look, of course, I'm an Azari and people might take my perspective as one-sided, but the fact remains that Armenians in Karabakh have ethnically cleansed the region. There is not a single Azari living in Karabakh. Before, in Karabakh plus the additional regions, there was almost 700,000 Azaris living there.
Yeah.
So, look, as an Azari, I would wish that Armenians, as citizens of Azerbaijan, with autonomy, with rights, would remain and live friendly with Azeris. We are Caucasians. We're from the Caucasus. We have the similar traditions, similar mentality. There is no reason why we should not get along. But the thing is, Armenian nationalism, okay, it's very deep. This mythology, it's very similar actually to Zionist movement. If somebody studies it deep, so the Armenian society have to let go of that, and I think the Azerbaijani society must understand that without granting some autonomy to Armenians and without acknowledging them as equal citizens, there will not be peace there.
What the other major power in the area is obviously Iran. What is their attitude towards this situation?
So, Islamic Republic of Iran, there is a big myth going on the online, and just shallow Western analysts who have no clue about what's going on locally. Shia Iran supporting Armenia, and Sunni Turkey supporting Shia Azerbaijan. This is nonsense. In 1990s, Iran actively was helping Azerbaijan. So, for example, the Fizuli corridor was opened by the Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guards, and they allowed many refugees from Fizuli to safely cross into Iran. This is one. Two, in Azerbaijan in 1993, we had 1,200 Afghan volunteers who came, Sunni Afghan volunteers who came and fought for Azerbaijan. Iran facilitated their coming to Azerbaijan. But the thing is, in 1993, we had a nationalist government come to power in Azerbaijan, which bought into this pan-Turkic myth. So while Iran was training our soldiers, facilitating Afghans to come and help Azerbaijan in a war, the new government was saying that we're going to partition Iran and unify the Azeris in Iran with Azerbaijan. So obviously,
so I guess Iran has good relations with Azerbaijan and Armenia and doesn't want a war on its borders.
Yes, Iran has a decent relationship with the Azerbaijani government and decent relationship with the Armenian government.
What about Israel? Because isn't Israel close to Azerbaijan?
I've read a few years ago a statement, I will not quote from which Israeli minister, but one Israeli minister said, and he summed it up quite well. He said, Azerbaijan for us is what is South Lebanon for Iran. And we have seen in many media reports, including the Western media reports, when there were assassinations of Iranian scientists by the Zionist regime. Many of these assassinations and logistical and intelligence work was conducted from Azerbaijan and Baku. And Iran was really upset about it. Even the Western sources kind of said, yeah, it's true. Maybe people can research it on their own. But Israel is actively interested in retaining the current regime in power in Azerbaijan. Why? Because it is militantly secular. Right? It's a typical scenario. Like why is Israel interested in maintaining Sisi in power? Right, a despot. So a similar situation. But here the situation is even better because it gives them this mask of tolerance. So here we have a Shia country. We have good relations with them. But of course, they're using Azerbaijan as a platform against Iran. And this is another danger, is that if these events spiral out of control, Iran is not going to sit idle and watch how Azerbaijan is going to be used as a platform. And many people don't know another thing, that Azeris in Iran, they are the backbone of the Islamic system. Prominent Iranian leaders.
Isn't Ayatollah Khamenei an Azeri?
Yeah, he's half Azeri. But there are other prominent Azeris.
I'm going to move you on simply because of time reasons. I want to ask you about the West as well. Who does the West want to win?
The West would prefer a status quo. Why? Because in that region, whatever movement happens, Russia will win. The West calls the shots other places, but in other places, in that region, Russia is the boss.
All right. And what about in terms of how this is going to end? What do you think? Local war or something bigger?
It can go if the war lasts for several months or close to a year. It can really spiral out of control.
Okay, wow. Okay, one to watch. Maksud, just stay on the line for a few more minutes. We have lots of comments coming in. Most of the comments are about Trump and Biden, comments about France, a few comments about Azerbaijan and Armenia as well. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for the civilians. Yameen Ya Rab. The people of both countries are beautiful and lovely people, says Wakas. Killing innocent people is the act of Yajuj wa Majuj. Oh yeah, let's talk about that. I've heard this. I don't know much about it, but people are saying, Gog and Magog, I think in English we call them. Yeah. They come from that region, the Caucasus. What's the story behind that?
I don't know nothing about it. I'm not a theologian. I have
All right,
no
we'll
idea.
do our research. Azeris will win, inshallah. Love from Bangladesh. Okay, got readers in Bangladesh. They're the descendants of Yajuj and Majuj. Okay, I must do research on that because I'm seeing this again and again. The last thing the world needs right now is another war. Pray to Allah, the Most High, for peace. Ali Muhammad says, anti-Erdogan Azerbaijani speaking, influenced by the West. He's talking about you. You're the anti. You're the anti.
So listen. I'm not. I have many disagreements with the AKP system in Turkey. I'm not anti them, but I'm just stating the reality. Turkey is a NATO member, and they are not there on their own. If anybody thinks they're there on their own, they're naive. They should just read some poli-sci books.
Okay, all right. Wakar says, I didn't know Azerbaijan is predominantly Shia. Interesting fact. You say 80% Shia, 20% Sunni, something like that?
Yes.
I see where this is heading. I think we're all a bit pessimistic these days. Maybe it won't spiral out of control. This man is speaking without the interests of Muslims in mind. Ooh, I don't know why.
What is the interest
You're a
of
committed Muslim, aren't you?
Inshallah, we'll find out. We'll find out when we're put in the grave, whether committed or not.
Yeah. Ali Muhammad says we need a real Azerbaijani, not one who gives a Western narrative. I won't read it anymore. Ali Muhammad's got a problem with you. I have no idea why. Muslim says, I think 5 Pillars are a good news site. They need to expand. Inshallah, we definitely do need to expand. There's so much more we can do. At the moment, we're a little bit constrained by finances, but inshallah, we will go from strength to strength and be a pillar and a rock for the ummah, inshallah. Is Roshan M. Salih a liberal? Oh, why? So look, I'm not. You're not the only one getting attacked here. No, I'm definitely not a liberal.
I just want to add that we every year Crescent looks at the year ahead, and last year in January we had our team of experts at Crescent International. We looked at Flashpoints 2020. The analysis is available on Crescent, and we identified Caucasus and the post-Soviet space as the place to watch for the next year.
Maksud, really appreciate you coming on all the way from Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur, and inshallah, I will speak to you again very soon. Assalamu alaikum. Okay, let's read out a few. Getting towards the end of the show. We've had so many comments today, and I haven't read out most of them, so I'm just going to whiz through some comments before I wrap up. Dev says, why should he love China when China is America's enemy? I think talking about Ramin there. Nice show, by the way. Jazakallah khair. I agree with the guest. I'm not sure which guest you're talking about. I like how Trump said we shouldn't let COVID get to us. That's about it. And it certainly got to him, didn't it? Biden is only doing one term. Republicans know they could easily bounce back in 4 years. So obviously we talked about 3 topics now. US elections, France and racism, and Azerbaijan. So obviously I'm going to read out comments about all of those topics. Dev says, greetings from Turkey. Great show. I think Trump may be the lesser evil, as I've understood for Turkey. Visiting Soul says, do you think Biden can create a Palestine state, or Trump make America native again? Says Trump is in the pocket of white supremacists and Christian Zionists. He thinks of Muslims as subhumans. I think that's pretty much true. Yeah. Thank you, Ramin. Exactly, this is right. Biden is the worst option for the Muslims. He represents every single haram in our religion, and he is completely hypocritical. A lot of 5 Pillars readers supporting Trump. I mean, I know you're not supporting them because you like him, but you see him as the lesser of the evils compared to Biden. I think most American Muslims would actually disagree with you. Atta says, are Biden and Trump both pro-Israel? They certainly are. Every mainstream politician in America is pro-Israel. Sorry for the sarcasm. You've been very sarcastic today, haven't you, Wakar? Iman says, what do you think of Kamala Harris? I don't know much about her, to be honest. I should have asked Ramin, but I know that she could become president because if Biden dies in office, she's next in line. I'm voting for Obama. He's no longer around. Keep up the good work, Roshan. Jazakallah khair. Let's get some other people online because I've read out a lot of comments from online, Dunya and Wakas. Happy to see Trump re-elected because he exposes the hypocrite leaders in the Muslim world. 10K subs says, I don't think voting a US president matters. Well, I mean, they are the most powerful country in the world, but I think ultimately whoever's president, they are controlled by powers behind the scene, like the military, industrial, and financial complex, which an ex-president, Eisenhower, alluded to in his valedictory speech. There are always people above the president. And we have more and more comments, but I think I'm going to wrap up now. I've read out many, many comments today. Jazakallah khair for sending them in. Okay, we are going to wrap this show up now. So we've been talking about the US elections, France and Azerbaijan. When it comes to the US election, my take is I slightly favor Biden. I must admit, I secretly wanted Trump to win in the last election. I didn't publicize it. I didn't shout it from the rooftops. But I just wanted the system to be shaken up a little bit. And I wanted America, I guess, to screw itself up a little bit because they've done so much harm to the rest of the world that I wanted America to be internally focused. But I have to say that Trump is extremely unpredictable. He could do anything, and he's not above starting a war, even though he hasn't started a major one yet. I really feel that on a flick of a switch, he agrees with the last person that came into his office. He could change his mind and he could start World War III. That's what I worry about. Internally, I don't care too much about what's going on in America. Ultimately, I care more about the rest of the world. In terms of Biden, I think he's going to be like Obama and Clinton and all these Democrat politicians. The rhetoric will be less Islamophobic, but the policies will perhaps be more Islamophobic. So I guess, but I'm wavering one way or the other. I don't like sitting on the fence. For me, I think 8 years of Trump is a little bit too much. So I would just opt for Biden. But I think most Five Pillars readers and viewers disagree with me. On France, I've lived in France. We live in a liberal paradise compared to France. Over there, it's literally Islamophobic. It's racism 24/7. It's mainstream. It's completely past the dinner table the test. The secularism they have over there is very aggressive. They want people to assimilate and become like the French. They don't let you just, focus on your own religion and your beliefs. Unfortunately, Britain is becoming more like that. But traditionally, the secularism that we've had here in Britain has been less aggressive and more multicultural and more tolerant. But unfortunately, that has changed during the War on Terror years. But ultimately, a lot of French hijabis, French women that wear the niqab, they're emigrating. Where they're emigrating to? They're doing hijrah to London. They're doing hijrah to the United Kingdom. And that's for a reason. France is an oppressive place to live for Muslims. On the third topic, Azerbaijan and Armenia, I'm not going to express an opinion. You know what? I'm going to express no opinion whatsoever simply because I don't know. My dad, God rest his soul, he passed away a few days ago. He always used to tell me, if you don't know, don't talk. So I'm not going to talk. I'm just going to leave it there in terms, I hope it's not going to be a regional conflagration because that can only be bad news for Muslims and non-Muslims in the region. That's it from me, Roshan Muhammed Salih. This was The Big Picture. I will see you guys again next week. We started a little bit later this week at 7 p.m. so that we didn't start broadcasting right in the middle of Maghrib prayers. I think next week we'll also keep it to 7 p.m. and then we'll take it back to 6 p.m. From there onwards. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.